FPL Game Week 28 team selection. My team has a number of injuries and suspensions, 2 free transfers to deal with it, and loads of other strategy points that we have to go through ahead of chip season in the next few game weeks. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricing. In today's video, I'll be looking at my team selection for Game Week 28 in FPL, but I've got a lot of issues and a lot of strategy points to go through, which will hopefully apply to your teams as well. If you enjoy the video, leave a like, hit subscribe, it would be massively appreciated. Let's start off with looking back at Game Week 27. It feels a little while ago now, so I won't dwell on it too long, but 53 points for me was a small red arrow, and at the halfway point of the game week, given that my Palmer captaincy had already failed at this point, I would have definitely taken a red arrow of 20-30k. That's what it ended up being, and Salah could have done so much more damage to my rank than he ended up doing, so I am grateful for that, although I'm also still a little bit frustrated that Palmer didn't get anything in a 4-0 win against an absolutely horrific Southampton side. It was a bloodbath in reality, and the fact that Palmer didn't get a return, I think anyone who captained him can feel fairly hard done by. 2 huge chances, one that I would classify as relatively big as well. At least 2 of those were one-on-ones, and I think on another day, that could have been 2, maybe even 3 attacking returns, but we're an outcome-based game at the end of the day, so he didn't return. 3 points from him doubled to 6. Salah got 6, so just the assist, and it could have been a lot worse than that, so I would have absolutely taken that after the Palmer blank was already locked in. Elsewhere, it wasn't a bad week for my side, and it kind of propped me up a little bit. So I obviously got the Trent 6-pointer and Gabriel 7 in my back line. Although Robinson was a bit frustrating, missing his only game of the season so far, has played 90 week in, week out, all the way through to now. Finally got a rest. I think he was due one, and I don't think it's a problem moving forwards because he is one of their best players and actually captained the side in the FA Cup afterwards, but did come off the bench and got a yellow card, giving him a 0-pointer. Very frustrating there. In my midfield, Kluivert was the standout with an absolutely beautiful finish for his 10-pointer, and Pedro up front did the damage as well, which I was very happy about, and I actually did start Pedro thinking that he would also get that game against Bournemouth. Got the penalty, 8 points, I will absolutely take that, and now he looks like he's back in favour, I suppose, with Hertzler. He might be a player that I can lean on in the next couple of game weeks for 28 and 29 if I have to, given all of the reds and yellows that I've got in my side and blank game weekers coming in game week 29 as well. CUNHA blanked for 2 points. Obviously, I bought him in the week before, so I did get a return out of him. But now after his, let's call it, performance in the FA Cup, he will be suspended for game week 28, 29 and 30. 3 game week suspension at minimum. It could be more, given that it was violent conduct and he didn't leave the pitch. A very frustrating transfer in. I don't think anyone could have seen him reacting like that and getting the red card in the FA Cup, but he does have a bit of previous, so maybe it's something I should have factored into my thinking. On the bench, ISAK did drop to my bench and Semenyo came off of it for 1 point. ISAK didn't play, got the yellow flag obviously, but did then play in the FA Cup. Came off a little bit early, I think more as a precaution than anything else, but I'll go into the worry around ISAK because there are some rumours that he might even be a doubt for the Carabao Cup final, which obviously occurs after game week 28. But at the moment, that's just what they are, rumours, nothing more, and I won't act on that information. He will probably be staying in my side. And currently, as far as FPL are concerned, as far as the app are concerned, he's not even yellow flagged. I've actually added that in manually just to illustrate the doubt that I have in my team for him. Now, one much more concerning factor is Lewis Hall, who did play in game week 27, only 1 point and was stuck on my bench, but is now confirmed out, sadly, for the rest of the Premier League season. Will miss the Carabao Cup final, which is horrible for Newcastle and for Lewis Hall, of course. Same with Gordon as well. He's not out for the season, but he is suspended for the Carabao Cup final. And Newcastle assets generally in the past week have been dropping like flies, so would it surprise me if ISAK is out as well? No, not at all. However, a small red arrow for me, nothing too horrific, and I do live to fight another day, but there's plenty of flags there, and I've got a few blankers in Game Week 29 as well. So let's take a look at some of the key decisions and also key factors that we need to have in our thinking when we select our teams ahead of Game Week 29 and beyond. So I'm just going to quickly wrap up something I talked about in an earlier video this week, which is all around the FA Cup quarterfinal permutations and what it could mean for blanks and doubles in the future. The confirmed fixtures now for Game Week 34 also include Newcastle Ipswich alongside Liverpool Spurs, Chelsea Everton and Wolves versus Leicester. Those are all fixtures that, because all of those teams are out of the FA Cup, they won't be blanking in Game Week 34. Yes, it's a few weeks away, but with a lot of us thinking about wildcards and where we might want to use free hits, especially in Game Week 29, knowing which teams are safe in Game Week 34 will be helpful. So hopefully that's helpful to you. There are 6 fixtures still at risk. The most at risk is Man City versus Villa, with both of those teams still in the quarterfinal of the FA Cup yet to come. That round of fixtures will be played after Game Week 29, before Game Week 30. So we will know which of these fixtures are confirmed or blanking by the time we get to Game Week 30. We might not necessarily know where those fixtures will move to if they are blanking in Game Week 34, just because there's a tight turnaround between the quarterfinals and the deadline for Game Week 30. So I think my wildcard window is most likely going to be 31, where we'll hopefully have more information on when some of these fixtures on screen at the bottom will move to, most likely Game Week 33 in most cases, and I go into that explanation in my previous FA Cup chaos video earlier this game week if you wanted more of a detailed explanation. But for now, all you really need to know is the top 4 fixtures on screen right now are safe, and it might mean that you can avoid using a free hit in that game week if you wanted to bring it forward to Game Week 29. I personally won't be doing so. So for the second week in a row, we've got a debate at least as to who the best captaincy option is, whether that's Salah or Palmer. Those will be the 2 standouts, no question about that, given that Salah has Southampton at home and Palmer has Leicester at home. Now, this is round 2 of the debate. Last week, Salah did win. I don't think it was a particularly spectacular win, considering it was 1 assist, but it could have been a lot more. And Palmer, anyone who captained him can feel a little bit hard done by, as I've already explained, given the big chances and the XG he created. So who's up for round 2? Well, I think this week the pendulum swings, I think, even further towards Salah. Loads of you captained him last week, even with Newcastle. With Southampton, it's an easier fixture than Newcastle, no question about that. Their defensive data is absolutely horrific and actually quite a lot worse than even Leicester's. So pound for pound, I think Salah is the best captaincy option, arguably even a good triple captaincy option, if you think he gets 90 minutes. Now, he usually does get 85 plus minutes in any game week, but given that Liverpool have to play PSG either side of this Southampton fixture, it wouldn't be crazy to suggest that Salah, although it's very unlikely he gets benched, it might not be crazy to suggest that he will maybe get taken off early if the game's wrapped up. I don't think Liverpool will be complacent about this game at all. Yes, it's one they should win comfortably, but I still think they'll put out their strongest or close to strongest 11 from the off, and then maybe bring players off around 60, 70 minutes if the game is sewn up, which, let's be honest, it probably should be. Salah in that time could easily get 2-3 attacking returns. So personally for me, he's my favourite captaincy choice. It's probably not enough to triple captain him, given the risk, I suppose, of him getting reduced minutes. But even in 60 or 70, he can do plenty of damage. And I think, given the data, given his ownership, and given the fact that he's running at about 10 points a game week across the entire season, regardless of fixture, he's my standout captaincy choice. And I don't think too many people would contest him being a good captaincy choice, even if they thought there was a bit of risk to him being brought off early. Palmer is an alternative. Leicester at home is a great fixture, of course. Defensively, not very sound either in Leicester's case, and the data is still good for Palmer. It was frustrating against Southampton. He did put up good numbers and didn't get the attacking return to show for it, and he's so close to getting it. I think he's just kind of slashing at chances a little bit. He's not as composed as he was at the start of the season. Maybe it's just weighing on his mind a little bit that he hasn't got a goal in a while, but he's got the quality to get past Leicester and score goals in that game. And I think once he gets one attacking return, once he gets one goal, then the floodgates will probably open, and that could easily be in the Leicester game. He's also much more likely than Salah to get good minutes, i.e. 90 minutes in this match, and in any given game week, he could easily get a penalty, get an attacking return, get an assist, and it could be a triple return for him quite comfortably. I think for me, I'm happy enough just owning him this week and captaining Salah given the fixture for Salah. But if you were more maverick and you are chasing rank, then Palmer is not a bad option this week and he's likely to get better minutes than Salah. For me though, I still think Salah outscores him even if he gets taken off early, and that is where I'll be putting my armband this game week. Right then, so I want to take a look at my team selection before looking at my potential transfers this week. Hopefully, on screen, you can kind of tell why I'm doing it in this order. I've got a lot of flags to deal with and blank game weekers next week that I also need to have in my mind because I've got a limited amount of free transfers to use between now and then. I've got 2 this week, 1.1 million in the bank, and I've obviously got that extra free transfer that I'll gain when I get to game week 29. So 3 in total to try and navigate all of these injuries and the blanks next game week. So first up, let's take a look at Lewis Hall. Now, obviously red flagged, out for the season. Very unfortunate for Newcastle and for Lewis Hall ahead of that Carabao Cup final. But in terms of FPL, it does leave me with a bit of a problem. Although, this game week in particular, I can probably sit him on my bench and start Robinson away at Brighton. Now, that's not a great fixture, but when I look at some of the potential transfers in for Lewis Hall that I could make this game week, but also could be playable in game week 29 and 30, because I'll also probably need them for those weeks too, then there's not a lot out there that I'm feeling massively confident on, and confident enough that they outscore not only Lewis Hall, but also Robinson. Even away at Brighton, he could easily get an assist. He could get something there. And I don't need them to just outscore either of those assets. I need them to outscore by 4 points or more to make it worthwhile, because any transfer I make on top of my already planned out moves costs me an extra -4, not this week, but next week. So I think for me, Lewis Hall probably sits on my bench until I wildcard now, unless I really need to do something desperate in game week 29 or 30. But my current plan in my defence is to start Robinson away at Brighton. Not ideal, but he could get something. And then next game week, start the likes of Gabriel, Robinson, and then probably sell Trent for someone like a Gvardiol. Now, that's not locked in just yet, but that's the way my mind is working right now. And I could arguably not even make the Gvardiol transfer and just start Greaves next week. It's not the best fixture for him either, but if I wanted to avoid another -4, then Greaves could start next week. And again, Trent and Hall could just sit on my bench for game week 29. Trent can come back in 30, of course. So I don't think I'm making a move in my backline, and I think Robinson comes in for Lewis Hall. I will lose value in Lewis Hall, but I don't think it's the end of the world given that I'm wildcarding in a couple of game weeks. In the midfield, nothing I want to do there this week at all. I've put the captaincy on Salah. Vice is going to be Palmer. And then I've got double Bournemouth away at Spurs. Spurs have looked better recently and are getting defenders back, but Bournemouth's attack is still pretty decent. And I do like owning both of them, not just for this week, but the next 3 in total, up against Brentford afterwards in the blank game week, and then Ipswich after that. Double Bournemouth midfield seems pretty acceptable to me, and they provide good value for money as well. If you own Dango, I'd be a little bit more concerned. Evanilson got minutes and started in the FA Cup, so I think it's only a matter of time until Dango either reverts back into the 3 behind the striker or potentially becomes a rotatable bench option for Iraola. I don't think you necessarily need to panic this week, and maybe you can rely on him for 1 extra start this week, but it's just something to keep in the back of your mind that he might not be as safe for minutes as he was before Evanilson came back. I think he's probably playable for this week though. Mbeumo in the middle against Aston Villa is definitely playable for the next 2 game weeks, but their fixtures do turn shortly afterwards, which is another benefit of me wildcarding in game week 30 or 31, because Brentford's fixtures will turn. Now that brings me on to the forward line, which is the big issue this week for a lot of people and for me. ISAK, I've put the yellow flag on manually. He's technically not yellow flagged, but there are rumours circulating, and he was brought off early for Newcastle in the FA Cup. So I think there's some doubt there. Now, Again, the rumours that I've seen online are unconfirmed at this point in time, but a few people are suggesting that he might not be okay for the Carabao Cup final. However, before recording this, I did see that he was doing media duties and taking all the pictures and looking fairly comfortable in those pictures ahead of the Carabao Cup final itself. So maybe there's a bit of a back and forth there. There's definitely a question mark, but I'm going to hold on to him this game week and start him in case he does play against West Ham, because that's a good fixture and it's not a transfer that I want to use this week because I've got something bigger planned for him and that spot next game week. Now, CUNHA is much more of an issue this week because if ISAK is a doubt, which I think he is a doubt, then I can only really rely on one extra player coming off my bench, and that is João Pedro. Now, if João Pedro comes off the bench for CUNHA anyway, then if Isak's also a doubt and doesn't play for whatever reason, then I'm relying on someone like Greaves coming off my bench, and that's really bare bones. I'm not loving that away at Crystal Palace. Even without Mateta, that's not great. So I think I can use one of my free transfers on getting rid of CUNHA, and therefore, if Isak's a doubt, then I can still rely on Pedro coming off my bench if he doesn't play for whatever reason. So I think at this point, it makes sense to have a look at my potential transfers in for CUNHA. I did describe it earlier on this week, but let's take a look at what I'm thinking now. Right then, so I'm reusing a graphic that I used in a previous video because I have basically the same decision to make as I was discussing then, but this will be much more geared towards what I'm doing rather than assessing each of the forwards in isolation. So this won't take as long as the previous one. Premium-wise, Haaland is the player to go for, but I've made the decision that I can't really get there this week without selling one of Salah or Palmer, just because of the money I'd need to get there to upgrade ISAK or CUNHA. So that is probably a move that I'm going to make in game week 29, because that week Salah doesn't play, obviously Southampton this week, so I'm not selling him this week. And then also Palmer, who is more likely going to be the player that I sell and sacrifice for a cheap midfielder to upgrade ISAK to Haaland. Now, Palmer obviously plays Arsenal next week, so it sits much better getting rid of him that week than it does this week. So Haaland I'm going to put to one side for now, but he's high on my radar and will almost certainly be coming in next game week. So that leaves me with the mid-tier and budget options, because I need to find someone that is no more than 8 million basically to replace CUNHA with. Now, I think my favoured option right now is Chris Wood. Now, he doesn't have the best data of everyone here, and I think someone like Wissa or Beto could be an interesting differential to go for, because let's face it, Chris Wood isn't going to help me much in terms of gaining rank. He's very highly owned, but I still don't want to lose those points every week. And if I genuinely do think that he scores the most points out of all of these forwards on the screen now over the next 3 game weeks, even with Man City, after that it's Ipswich, then Man United, 2 defences that have really struggled this season, I still quite like it as a 3 game week run for him. And even if the ownership is high, if he gets points, I want those points. And no matter which other player I go for, if I think he gets points, then I'm already playing catch up, and I need to hope that Beto or Wissa, for example, outscore him in those 3 game weeks. And I'm not that confident that they do. Now, Wissa has better data. I would say the fixtures are okay. Aston Villa this week, Bournemouth next. It's not bad, but generally speaking, I've already got Mbeumo. I don't think I need to double up on Brentford, but it is a differential option I don't hate the look of. After that, Beto has 2 good fixtures, Wolves and then West Ham in the blank game week, is much cheaper, so it allows me a little bit more flexibility in who I might downgrade Palmer from next game week potentially. So I don't hate that as an option, and again, the data is good. It's over 0.5 XGI per 90. So if for whatever reason I wanted to take on the high effective ownership of Chris Wood, then Wissa or Beto might be interesting options. For me though, I think I'm going to go with Chris Wood. I fancy it as a matchup against Man City because Elanga and Hudson-Odoi can exploit that high line of City, get in behind their fullbacks, and on the cutback, even if Chris Wood only has 2 or 3 shots that game, I back him to get something. And then Ipswich is potentially even a captainable fixture. It's a great fixture for him, followed by Man United, who again, defensively at least, aren't looking too great right now. So I think Chris Wood makes sense for me. But if you wanted to go differential, if you're chasing, Wissa or Beto could be interesting options. I'm personally almost certainly going to go for Chris Wood, not just because of safety, but because I genuinely think he scores the most points out of these options, outside of Haaland, of course, over the next 3 game weeks. So next week, Haaland comes in for ISAK, and I'll downgrade Palmer, but this week, I think it's Chris Wood in for CUNHA for me. So just to quickly wrap up the video, I haven't made the transfers yet, so my bus team is still on screen, but Chris Wood will likely be coming in for CUNHA up top, meaning that I'll start off with Wood and ISAK in my front 2. ISAK is obviously that question mark. I hope and think he will start, but if he doesn't and he is injured for whatever reason, then João Pedro can come off my bench, and it gives me that little bit of security that I possibly need this week. I don't think I'm going to use any more than 1 free transfer. If I was going to use a second, I could be tempted to maybe upgrade Hall to Munoz, for instance, but I think the fact that he blanks in game week 29 and it does take me 1 extra transfer away from what I need to do next game week, and it confirms that I'll need to take an extra hit next week, it's probably a move that I'm unlikely to make at this point in time. I'll probably just start Robinson, and then I might need to take a -4 next game week, unless I'm comfortable starting Greaves, which is a possibility. But I think I'm going to chase the upside on going with Gvardiol in my backline as well, and that would be the hit that I need to take in game week 29. But either way, I'm fairly comfortable with my lineup for this game week. Not ideal losing CUNHA and potentially ISAK, obviously Lewis Hall as well, but I think I've gotten off fairly lightly considering the depth on my bench. I can cope with it, and fingers crossed, I can get back to a green arrow and nestle inside the top 300k ahead of blank game week 29, in which I, of course, don't plan on free hitting at the moment. In the meantime, if you've got any questions of your own, do feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll try and get back to you before the game week 28 deadline. If you enjoyed today's video, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. In the meantime, though, good luck in game week 28, and I'll see you on the other side as we start preparing for blank game week 29.